Welcome to Rep Matters, where we bring a diverse perspective to tech and venture capital. We sat down with some of Canada's most interesting entrepreneurs and investors in order to understand their journeys, the impacts they hope to have moving forward, and how to improve equity and inclusion for the Black community in tech and VC. As well as being leaders in their respective fields, these entrepreneurs and investors all have something else in common. They're Black. Their lived experience as Black Canadians has helped shape their path to success, and we made sure to dive into what it means to thrive in such a homogeneous ecosystem. I hope you enjoy. Today on Rep Matters, we have the innovative Jimoh Ovbiagele. Jimoh is the co-founder and chief technical officer of Ross Intelligence, a legal research software that uses artificial intelligence to help thousands of US lawyers work faster and smarter. Jimoh's work has earned him recognition as a Forbes 30 Under 30 and as an American Bar Association legal rebel. We are very lucky to have him here on the show with us today. Jimoh, thank you for being here. Welcome to Rep Matters.
Thank you for having me.
Great, so I just want to dive in and ask you what Ross Intelligence is and what's your role there?
Yeah, so Ross is an AI-powered legal research engine. So lawyers can type in their legal research questions as they would ask another lawyer. And Ross will use artificial intelligence to read through millions of cases in order to find them answers to their question. So we see a future where lawyers are equipped with these advanced technologies and are able to help more people, and more people have the ability to defend their rights, which is something that should have always been true. And today that's only true for the most wealthy in our society.
Yeah, and why is that relevant specifically for the Black community?
Well, justice is very dependent on your economic status today. And because of the racial income gap in the United States and in Canada, Black people are disproportionately affected. So these sorts of technologies will have a huge benefit for the Black community. And it's something that we're very passionate about and what motivates us in our work every day.
Absolutely. And so in your role as a CTO, what do you do?
As a leader, I'm not directly designing or coding myself anymore.
Do you kind of miss that? Or?
I do miss that. I do miss that a lot.
Because I know you really are like a tech guy.
I really am a tech guy. I miss the days of staying up until 3 a.m. trying to get a feature out.
Yeah.
Or some people don't like bugs, but some bugs they're like problems, and you're trying to diagnose the problem. So I miss those times, but nowadays it's about recruiting great people, making sure that they know what the company is trying to do, what our goals are, making sure that everyone understands our company's values, and then working with the talented people we have to shape a strategy that will allow us to succeed.
I want to dive into identity. We spoke a lot about this. We're similar. We're both biracial. So your father was Nigerian.
Yes, my father was Nigerian. My mother was Filipina.
Filipina, yeah. Exactly. So what was it like growing up in Canada and the US, and just being different?
Yeah, it was interesting. I moved to the US when I was 5, and I was very different from everyone around me. Not only was I Nigerian and Filipino, I was also Canadian.
Yeah.
So I would say A.
I caught so much flack. I went down south when I was a full adult.
Yeah.
And caught so much flack for being a Canadian. It's
Yeah.
kind of crazy.
Yeah. I got along with everyone, but Black people and Asian people never really saw me as their own because I didn't share all of the same traditions and values, and had the same experiences. But the funny thing was that white people saw me as Black, And I do see myself as Black too, but I don't feel like it describes all of me. And there was definitely a pressure to conform to one culture or ethnicity over the other, but I decided from a very young age that I didn't want to make that choice. I wanted to embrace all of it. I didn't want to be constrained by other people's ideas of me. And I think through that, I learned to be comfortable being different, and I learned to appreciate other people's points of view.
That's really interesting because I feel like I only got to that realization when I was much older.
Yeah.
You know, people always try to put you in a box. They want to define you. They look at you and they're like, is he, you know, Latino? Is he Arabic?
Yeah.
Is he a mix? Who knows? And they try to categorize you and
Yeah.
treat you differently based on what they think you
Yeah.
are. And it took me a long time to be like, I'm not going to say I'm white or I'm just
Yeah.
me. It's okay to be mixed.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that you had that identity, that strong identity at a younger age.
Yeah.
How do you think that impacted your ability to be an entrepreneur?
Well, I think it's very important as a leader and entrepreneur to be okay with everyone else thinking you're wrong.
Totally.
Right. A lot of startups, when they were first started, sounded ridiculous. Airbnb, the original idea was you would rent out air mattresses in your house. Let strangers live in your house. That sounded like a bad idea from both sides. Both the person seeking a place to stay and
whoever's
renting it out. Google the same way. It's like, wait, you don't want to have ads all over your homepage? You don't want to sell search results? Like, how are you going to make money? So I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be okay being different. But that doesn't just mean like being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian.
For sure.
You need to understand different views. You have to acknowledge that no one has the full picture. Everyone has a different piece of the puzzle. And that's what you learn being mixed. Seeing the world from different sides. You go to one dinner and the world is this way. Go to another dinner with the other side of your family and the world is this way. Totally. You realize that your view is limited.
Mm-hmm. There are alternate realities.
Yeah, there's alternate realities. There's alternate realities, and you need to be able to synthesize that and make decisions.
So we were just discussing, identity and growing up, coming of age. So did you have any mentors that looked like you when you grew up that really influenced kind of the way you saw the world?
I didn't have many mentors or role models who looked like me, who wanted to do what I wanted to do. The area of Houston I lived in was a low-income area. A lot of the people that I knew never went to university, didn't know anyone who went to university. The people that I went to elementary school and high school with did not go on to pursue higher education. But for high school, I ended up going to this engineering and medical science academy that was an hour away from where I lived. At the time, I wanted to be a doctor and I wanted to start my own clinic. That's what I thought would be my venture, my life venture. And in the senior year of our program, they would select some of the top students to go intern with physicians at hospitals and clinics. I was luckily selected as one of those students, and they paired me with this doctor named Dr. Ellington. Dr. Ellington was a very accomplished individual. He not only had his degree in medicine, he had his degree in law.
Okay.
He was the medical director and a vice president of one of the largest insurance companies in the United States.
Whoa, really?
And in addition, he was not only an oncologist, he was a dermatologist as well. So
what can this guy not do?
Yeah, he was a pretty awesome guy.
And he's black.
And he happened to be black.
Yeah. There you go.
And he was one of the first people that I knew who looked like me, who wanted to achieve, who had achieved the levels of success that I wanted to at that time in the field of medicine. And that opened my eyes. That it made me feel like someone who looked like me and came from similar circumstances could do the things that I wanted to do. He was a proof point. And what was amazing about his journey is that when he started university, it was 1964, 1 year before the Civil Rights Act was passed in the United States, ending segregation. So he had even fewer role models than I did and more challenges. But he was determined, and he had faith that things would work out for him, that he would make things work. And by doing so, I didn't have to purely walk based on faith. Instead, I could walk based on sight. I could see an example. And that's why I think role models are very important. And I hope to one day be a role model for young Black people who want to start ventures, become entrepreneurs.
I think you already are a role model. I mean, I think you're one of my role models, like a multi-million-dollar company, and you're well on the way for sure. And that's why rep matters. That's why we're here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we spoke about the sort of mental gymnastics it takes to navigate white spaces and show up as yourself and not hold a grudge of what you perceive might be happening on the other side or in someone else's mind. Can you speak to how that plays out as an entrepreneur who went to seek funding? When on the other side of the table is often white male VCs. How did you navigate that situation?
Yeah. It could be difficult fundraising as a Black man sometimes, because there's this fear in the back of your head that you're going to be judged, that you're going to be disregarded, dismissed because of the color of your skin. So what that makes you do in your head, it makes you be very conscious of your behavior, of your actions, of your words. You try to suppress anything that might trigger ideas of negative stereotypes in the minds of the people that you're speaking to. And this can take you away from the task at hand, which is talking about the innovations, the accomplishments of your company. It creates a lot of pressure. Another thing that creates a lot of pressure is the feeling that you're representing your whole community.
That was one of my questions. This is great. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, for university, I went to the University of Toronto, and I was a member of Trinity College. The University of Toronto is broken up into these different colleges, and Trinity College was known to be home to Canada's most affluent students. So I happened to be one of 2 Black people
out of how many,
in my year.
Out of how many students in a year?
In each class, I think there are about 800. Yeah.
2 Black students?
2 Black students, yeah.
Out of 800?
Yep.
Okay.
So one day, my friend confided in me that I was the first Black friend that he ever had. I was honored.
How old were you?
We were 18, 19.
In Toronto?
In Toronto. Yeah, in Toronto.
That's crazy.
Because it's just different social networks.
Yeah.
And your social networks are often heavily dependent on where you go to school. Where you go to school is heavily dependent on what neighborhood you live in. What neighborhood you live in is heavily dependent on
socioeconomic status.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I was shocked, and I realized that for many of the people that I meet, I'm their first impression of Black people. And every relationship, every experience that they have with a Black person afterwards would be anchored on their experience with me.
It's a lot of pressure.
So when you're going into a VC firm and you realize that they probably have a couple Black founders a month, maybe a couple Black founders a year, pitch them. You don't want to let your community down. But
is that a fair pressure to internalize, though?
It's not a fair pressure, and it's not productive. And what I eventually had to learn was to, one, know that most VCs are good. They don't judge people by the color of their skin. And if I was dismissed or disregarded by someone who was racist, then they've done me a favor, because I don't want to work with them. And the world has changed, and you don't need money from people who may think less of you. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of it is just focusing on what you can control, which is explaining your innovations, your accomplishments, and how you see the world differently.
I want to talk about the products that Black entrepreneurs develop. So a lot of Black entrepreneurs get funded for products they develop that cater to the Black community, because, you know, the main line is you have an unfair advantage into this community that we don't necessarily understand, and therefore we are going to fund you. What happens when that's not the case? When a Black founder is creating something for everyone, like you are with Ross Intelligence, does that conversation change because they may no longer think that you are you have that unfair advantage, or whatever the case is? How does that change that interaction and the desire to invest in Black entrepreneurs, if at all? I
have always thought that investment thesis is incomplete. It's true. It has true elements. Black entrepreneurs do have a unique insight into the neglected needs of the Black community. And there is an unfair advantage there. And there is a lot of money to be made by pursuing that. But the thesis is incomplete. Black people are capable of solving problems that touch everyone. Barack Obama wasn't the president of Black America. He was the president of the United States of America. And by narrowly focusing on Black founders who are solving problems for Black people, investors are potentially missing out on innovators, entrepreneurs, companies that can change the world.
And so when you were raising funds, did you feel like you came to that blockade, or is this just more of a general thought that you've seen about the industry as a whole?
This is a more general thought about the industry as a whole. I worry about what message it sends to Black entrepreneurs. Because as they say, it's as much about what you don't say as what you do say. And by saying, essentially just doing an open call for Black people, creating products for Black people, you are implicitly excluding
Black entrepreneurs who want to create for everyone.
Exactly.
Can you describe what it means for you, how much of an opportunity tech was for you personally, because it's a wealth driver and you're creating wealth through it. So are there any other drivers of wealth that you see that could help decrease the wealth gap between, you know, the average Canadian and the Black community in Canada, or is tech really one of those drivers?
Tech is definitely a driver because there are high salaries in tech. Also, if you decide to become an entrepreneur, you could create a lot of wealth in a short period of time. But at the same time, it's risky. Home ownership is definitely an area that can help close the wealth gap. A lot of your finances over your life is dependent on the assets that your parents, your grandparents passed down to you. And these advantages compound over time. So if you are the first person in your family to go to university, you get a good job, you're going to be spending a lot of your career income on buying a house. Whereas maybe someone who inherited a house doesn't have to worry about that, and they can invest that money in other places. So I think that's well known that home ownership is crucial in your financial trajectory. Higher education is also another area that helps break the cycle. And studies have shown if your parents go to college, you'll likely go to college. Yeah. So I think tech is a great area for young Black people to go into. I would like to see more programs to help increase homeownership for Black people, and also higher education for Black people as well.
Amazing. Amazing. So how do you think the tech community and the VC communities or ecosystems, or however you want to call them, how are they positioned in order to help drive some social change? Do you think they are positioned at all, or do you think that it's not their responsibility to take on some of these social causes?
I think the VC community is in a unique position to help the Black community, to help take down racial, socioeconomic barriers. The VC community funds seed companies that eventually turn into billion-dollar companies that employ thousands of people, creating jobs, creating wealth. And by funding Black entrepreneurs, you are funding a generation of companies that will embrace diversity, that will inspire the generation. So I think that VCs have enormous power to affect the future for Black people.
Do you think that VCs always recognize that? Like, do they understand just how impactful it could be for society as a whole? For if you know, maybe there was either, I don't know, there's tons of ways of going about it, maybe a fund specifically for Black entrepreneurs, not just the blanket diversity, but you know, the Black community is one of the least represented communities in tech in North America, right? There are other visible minority communities that are overrepresented, which is an amazing thing. And that's also a driver of wealth within their communities, right? Do you think that VCs are actually conscious of the fact that, hey, if you just take a portion of your dollars and send it here, it could change an entire community? Do you think that they know that and are willingly choosing not to, or do you think they just don't know? Or they're unwilling to take the risk?
I don't think they're unwilling. I just think that they're unaware. We're unaware of problems that other people face. It's only until you know someone, you meet someone, you become a part of a community that you truly understand a problem and how you can help. So I don't think VCs are actively and consciously choosing not to invest in Black entrepreneurs. But I think and I hope if and when they realize that they choose to do something.
Yeah. And so it brings in, I guess, the unconscious aspect of it. Everyone is aware that there are unconscious biases. At this point, there's no longer a question of whether investment decisions are made in a biased way. There's studies that have shown it. Investment decisions, you know, are, whether consciously or not, they're made in a biased way.
Yeah.
And so once everyone has that base understanding, what do you think it'll take in order for people to address those unconscious biases? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of internal work. Mm-hmm. So we've seen society kind of shift since George Floyd was killed into a more conscious space where people are finally taking a little more ownership over the biases that they may have. How do you think? What do you think the first step is for that?
I think the first step is education.
Yeah.
We know that we have biases. We don't know what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to identify them and name it.
Mm-hmm.
As they say, name it and tame it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I love that.
once you're able to identify a bias, you'll recognize it when it comes up, when that thought comes up in your head, and then you can do something about it. You make the unconscious conscious. And then once an organization has a shared vocabulary, you can help each other.
Mm-hmm.
You could say, hey, are we watching out for this bias in our process?
Mm-hmm.
You can have those conversations, but it starts with education,
Yeah.
understanding these biases and having conversations about them.
So it's interesting when we talk about conscious and unconscious bias. I've been having a lot of conversations with diversity, equity, and inclusion consultants. I'm dabbling in that space myself. And what I'm coming to realize after doing a lot of reading and talking to a lot of people is you can't actually correct for unconscious bias in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You may become more aware of it, but what really needs to happen, especially at a corporate level, let's say, or at a systems level, right, is there needs to be processes in place
right.
in order to curb the ability for your internal and unconscious biases to affect whatever is going on.
Right.
So whether that's hiring, promotion, investment decisions, right, there needs to be a very clear process outlined
right.
with diversity, equity, and inclusion in mind.
Right. And metrics.
Yeah, there has to be metrics.
You can't improve what you don't measure.
You can't improve what you don't measure.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you need to set benchmarks. You need to set metrics. You need to measure those metrics on a regular cadence. That will, if your metrics are below those benchmarks, that should start a conversation and an investigation to why is there that gap. And you're right, it's super hard to identify bias in the moment. There are simple things that could help, like a checklist,
Yeah.
and making it a part of the process to check that checklist.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, but it's a really tough problem. It's a really tough problem.
For sure. So we touched a little bit on sort of the opportunity that tech and VC have in order to affect social change in terms of anti-Black racism and creating opportunities for the Black community. Can you just touch on what your thoughts are in terms of social responsibility for companies in general? Right, capitalism for the past, let's say, 50 years has been built on this idea that there's no responsibility other than to the shareholder. Right, it's all about making money and nothing else matters or is relevant to a company. We're seeing a kind of a shift now. Where do you kind of stand in that, in how that sort of capitalism is approached?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's an important issue. We created the idea of a corporation to give a business or an organization the rights that a person would have. But with those rights come obligations as well. You have an obligation to society. And right now we're asking individuals not to just be bystanders or passive or not racist. You have to be anti-racist.
Actively preach.
Yeah.
Can I do one of these? Preach.
Yeah. So I think we should expect the same activity from corporations as well. If we're going to treat them like individuals, they need to do their part as well. And they have incredible power too.
Yeah. And so I think hopefully this is a shift that'll continue in an authentic way, right? Because a lot of what's been happening is, there's surface level performative allyship, and things that aren't built in an authentic interest for the well-being of the Black community, and hopefully that there'll be some companies that step up and really lead and create long-term change. So I want to know what's your favorite book in terms of anti-racism or Black history, and why.
One of my favorite books related to Black history isn't all about Black history, but it's about the history of the United States. It's called A People's History of the United States. And why I found that book interesting is because it talked about America during colonial times and how Black people, African American slaves, and poor white people and Native Americans often got along, intermingled, started families. When they were oppressed by the ruling class, they fought against the ruling class together. But then there came this time, this period, where the ruling class started to become threatened because they were outnumbered by the African American slaves, which they're importing, the poor, white, landless, indentured servants, and Native Americans. So they started putting rules in place to divide them, making it illegal to intermarry, to have children. And when you learn that, it makes you think about how America would be and Canada would be different if those decisions, those rules weren't put in place. Because you think about the United States and you think about poor white people and Black people.
Right now, we're all butting heads.
Butting heads, have
why?
never gotten along, will never get along. You think it's nature. It's not nature. It was by design, and I think that reading about that gives me hope about what's possible, because if it's not nature, it could be changed. Yeah.
So we're going to go to the devil's advocate round. Basically, I ask a question or say a statement, and I want you to give a really short response in, say, 20 to 30 seconds.
Cool.
Okay? Why does representation matter?
Representation matters because not everyone in our society is being fully utilized to their potential. So if that's the case, that's a problem for everyone. But also, we value an equal society, and people aren't being treated equally. So it matters morally. It also matters economically.
Amazing. There is no racism in Canada.
There is racism in Canada. There's still more work to do. We need to set our bar higher, and that's hard for leaders to do. Lewis Hamilton, he's a F1 driver, everyone probably knows. He talks about what's the hardest thing for him to do. And the hardest thing for him to do is to push himself as the leader, because he's not chasing anyone. And that's what Canada needs to do as well. We need to continue to set the bar higher.
Amazing. Another one is, at my company, we're colorblind. We don't see race. We've never had a racism issue.
So that may be true. It's unlikely. The thing about unconscious biases is that you don't know you have them. So the first step I would recommend, if you think that, is to measure your diversity and start from there.
Start from there. Probably listen to the people of diversity that you have in your company and see if they'll give you an authentic response.
Yes. Yes.
Why do we have to be talking about race all the time? Can't we just get along?
We have to talk about race all the time because everyone isn't getting the fair shake. The path is more difficult for some people. Some people have to struggle more than other people. And we have to keep on talking about race until everyone is on the same playing field. Our work is not done yet. We can't tell ourselves that everything is good because everything is not. And just because things are good for you doesn't mean things are good for your neighbor. So that's why we have to keep on talking about it.
Amazing. We don't have a racism issue. There is simply little to no Black talent in tech.
So there's definitely a pipeline problem. However, there's still a problem in the part of the pipeline that we are responsible for as employers in technology. Are your ranks representative of the population that's coming out of universities? For many companies, the answer is no. So there is a job for us to do, but there's also a job for the institutions responsible for the other parts of the pipeline as well, from elementary school all the way to universities.
Amazing. Well, Jimoh, it was great to have you on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to come here. I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. It's an honor. Yeah.
Thanks for watching Rep Matters. Keep the conversation going by liking, commenting, and especially sharing our videos with your community. Stay updated by following us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. See you next time.